Grab your coffee and join me, Nicoa, for a caffeinated conversation about life. I'll be talking to people who have chosen to walk their own paths and, just like me, are creating a life by design. I hope it will give you the inspiration you need to do exactly the same. Hey everybody, we're at Coffee with Nicoa. Me just trying to figure out how to say Annika Pavel's name. And Annika, welcome. So glad to have you.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here, and thank you for having me.
Of course. I mean, we want to find life by design role models out there, and you definitely are a unique example of someone who has come from a very unique upbringing, a very unique start in life, and has had some very exciting highlights and have come out on the other side of it. So let me give everybody a quick overview, and then we'll just see where this conversation takes us. Sound like a plan?
Sounds like a great plan.
Perfect. Well, Annika is actually from originally Czechoslovakia, now referred to as the Czech Republic. And her birth name was Jarmila Kochvarova. Did I say it right?
Excellent. Yeah. Well done.
Well done. But she goes by Annika, and she is also not only has an exciting life, but she is an author, and we'll talk about her collection of essays today as well. She has this interesting experience that many of us, and those of us listening, the majority are in a first world situation who can't even imagine the life that you've had. What was intended as a 1-year stay in England turned into her becoming a refugee with her parents. I might add, I read that one story that you shared when the Soviet Union invaded her homeland. I mean, I love the little summary. It says the whole circumstance was extremely frightening and terrifying, and the ability to choose whether to go back into your country at that moment in time became life-changing decision-making. She received a crash course in life that took her from sleeping in a telephone booth at the Victoria Railway Station in London to waitressing, to the lights of the fashion runway, and on to magazine covers. And ladies and gentlemen, we are actually speaking to a James Bond girl. She was in The Spy Who Loved Me, 1977. And I am just telling you, I have looked into her history, and I'm actually she's like an American dream story, even though she's not from America. But she came into America and has had lots of American experiences that I can't wait to dive deeper into the fact that she created her own dream from nothing. Although I wouldn't say nothing, more of a strong values-based foundation from her family. Her work has been published in print, online, and her book. And the name of your book again, tell us the name of your book.
It's called The Encounter with the Future.
The Encounter with the Future, which is a collection of essays that you've written about your life.
Collection of personal essays, which are not necessarily about me. It's about my family. And that's what it is.
I can't wait to read it. You actually were nominated for a Pushcart Prize. And I noticed that when I was doing my research that you have been published in a number of online locations. So everybody go look up Annika Pavel, Pavel, and we will put all of her information obviously inside of the show notes. But let's dig deep into who you are and your life by design. Annika, tell us a little bit about who you are today. Like, what's life like for you right now in 2024?
It's great. I'm having a time of my life. I have 8 grandchildren, 8 under 8. But now It's 9 under 8. And so I'm having a lot of fun with them. And I'm very close with my children. I'm very proud of my children. Don't get me started. So, and I'm doing now finally what I have always wanted to do, and that is write. I write. And I've been very lucky that my work has been published. I have also, I'm also written a book that I plan to publish Afterwards, which is a fiction. And I also wrote a short stories for children about my little dog, Barney. And so life is great, really wonderful. I'm very busy. Boredom is a word I can't spell. And I'm enjoying my life.
Oh, that's beautiful. I'm so happy to hear that. And I'm not surprised at all. So you have how many children of your own? So you've got these 9 grandchildren.
3.
How many of these kids?
3.
3 kids of your own.
3.
Okay.
I have 3 children of my own, 2 boys and a girl. And 2 of them had 3 children and 1 has 2. But he's threatening to have one more. So
I hope so. My youngest is in her senior year at North Carolina State University, and it was bittersweet. Her first day of class, I thought, I hope somebody has grandchildren so they also go to NC State, because we're big state fans.
Yeah.
I don't even know.
Yeah.
The generation today, the younger generation, I don't know how many grandbabies I'll end up with, because they don't seem to be birthing a lot of babies. But fingers crossed. I want to be like you.
Yeah. I'm sure they will. They will. Mind you, I was giving up. Believe me, they took their sweet time. They were not early breeders. They all of them were over 30, comfortably over 30, should I say? So don't give up. But I will tell you, college. Yeah, college goes by so fast that you won't even know how quick.
I bet. And it's already, it's been a fast, what do they say? The moments last forever, but the years fly by. And that's been my truth for sure with these 3. So tell me about this lifestyle that you're sitting in now. If you were to flash back, do you think your younger self would imagine that you would be sharing your current circumstances like this with all this family around you? Was that ever part of your young dreams about life?
I really have to say I didn't really think that far. Young people don't think of themselves as old. My dream was to really see the world, travel, write. I've always wanted to be a writer. I have never in a million years thought that I would be a model, let alone be in movies. And so I'd never expected to live in America ever, or abroad. I was planning to come back, but the Soviet Union had a different idea, and that's why I'm always very attuned of what's going on, and so that it changed. But I was always able to adapt, and I never viewed travel and living in different countries as negative. To me, it was hard for the years I could not go back home. That was hard because I was very close with my family, my parents, and that was very hard. But
you took your first trip to England before the invasion and all of the changes. So you were already beginning to launch your life. What were you, 18, 19 when you headed to England?
I was 18. I graduated from high school. I was 18. And believe me, at the time, nobody traveled out of Czechoslovakia, nobody. But I was always the type of person who believed. I was a stubborn little girl, and I was like, I don't care what they say. I am going to try. And I did. And I was lucky. I will say that it wasn't through my perseverance. I was lucky that at the time, Alexander Dubček was beginning to shape the country into different kind of a communism. He wanted to have a communism with a human face. And unbeknownst to me, things began to loosen up. And they did loosen up, and I was able to come out. And of course, the Soviets did not like it. And we know what happened in August. They came in with the tanks and stopped it. So it's really, in retrospect, I was exceedingly lucky because we talk in 6 months period. And though if I would have missed it, it's sometimes a fate. I went to school 1 year earlier. I graduated very early. When I graduated, I was only 17. And my mother always pushed me to go. She believed that I was able to manage, and I was youngest of three. And so I went to school 1 year early. And I always thought, if she didn't do that, I would not be here sitting talking to you.
That's right. And tell me that phrase. You said she used to always say that travel was the passport to freedom. Or what was
is a university of life. That's what she always said. Travel is a university
of life.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So that is a critical communication. I remember once sitting across from my father when I was in maybe middle school, maybe age 12 or 13. And we had never traveled outside of our state here in the United States in North Carolina. And I had never, the furthest I'd been was either the mountains and maybe, I don't even think I'd been to Florida yet. I think I just stayed in my state. And I leaned across and was talking to my father and said, "Do you think that I'll ever go to Europe?" And he said to me, and I think this is like your mother validating your dreams and encouraging you. He said to me, and now he passed away 2 years ago. He never went to Europe. So keep that in mind. He never went to Europe, but he said to me, "Nicoa, not only will you go to Europe, you'll call me one day from the Swiss Alps skiing with your family." And I was like, oh, okay. But it was that enthusiasm and that creation of a vision and his response, even though he himself might have thought, "Lord, I don't know if I'll ever leave the country. I don't know if I'll ever go to Europe." But he wanted me to believe that that was possible. And since that time, I've been to 30 countries. I did not ski in the Swiss Alps, but I did call my father with my family from the Italian Alps once. So
up is up, right?
That's right. And your mom, it sounds like your mom and your father were both very supportive of you. And tell me about life in your family and how that shaped you.
We were a pretty close-knit family. My mother always believed in books. She came from an extremely poor family, and they couldn't go to school in the winter time. And so she always gave us, for every birthday, every Christmas, every name day, we got books. And most of the books were about travel. And it's something she could never do. And so she wanted to broaden our horizon, my brothers as well. She knew we couldn't travel, but she felt if you read about it, you will at least absorb some of the wisdom of the world. And so it was always very important. And so she believed in education as well. Both of my brothers went to college. But when the opportunity for me to go, she felt, forget about college. You're going to get a university of life. You get it out there by yourself. And I was so young, and she just believed I can manage. And she pushed me out. Not that I needed really much pushing, but she did. She didn't say, "Oh, what are you talking about? You've got to go to college first." No, she said, "Just go."
Oh, I'm so glad she did. And I know you are.
My mother did that despite of the fact that she was diagnosed with cancer at the time. And she wasn't going to stop. She wanted to make sure that I go. And I did. And in fact, I do believe that being able to get my hands on a medication that was not available in Czechoslovakia, that I was able to maybe prolong her life. And I think she also had such a strong mind. And when it became possible, when my life changed, that I was able to travel and that I was able to have her travel to England, boy, nothing was gonna, she used to say, that pesky cancer is just not gonna stop me.
Oh, wow. So you were able to access medications and help her. So how much longer was she with you guys?
Well, she died. She was diagnosed when I was 18, and she died when I was 31.
Oh, I'm so glad you were able to get the medication. Well, what a treat to have had access to travel so young. You had a pretty extreme experience, though. Would you like to share a little bit about your story about being in England? I find that almost shocking. I mean, and I really enjoyed your essay. I really enjoyed reading about it. Tell us a little bit about what it felt like to be 18 years old and in that boarding house with the experience that you had. Tell us that story. Guess what, y'all? I published a book. Your Life by Design, a Coffee with Nicoa self-care coaching journal, is now available on Amazon. This interactive journal begins and ends with powerful queries, guiding you on a quest for the kind of life by design you don't need a vacation from. I've included an in-depth look at strategic self-care to empower you and hold you accountable to really getting to know your true self. It's time to prioritize you. Use the link in the show notes to buy yours today.
I was supposed to be an au pair, which is taking care of children. However, the situation was different, which I really didn't care as long as I was in England. And so it was a boarding house. There were several lodgers, and I was helping out. And the woman I was working for was a wonderful person and had a huge influence and stayed in my life until her death and always pushed me. She was her brainchild that, I should go to different places and see. And she always was there for me. But she was really so ahead of her time. She always helped young women. She was really supposed to do a dermatologist treatment, but one girl got pregnant, and so she used to live in Rhodesia or Zimbabwe now. And she used to help women who had children who were dying of hunger and were pregnant. So she would do early abortions. And so these girls came and they asked and begged for help. But I was so naive and so stupid in that respect that my mother and I never had the talk before I left. And so I just didn't get it. And so when eventually she had to go to prison, I was shocked, and I kind of was really homeless second time because I had to go to London. And suddenly, even that little home that I had in Ipswich, that house where I knew I could always stay when Soviet Union invaded Czechoslovakia, suddenly that was gone, and I had to go on my own and make my own way and work in an office of the solicitor who represented her. I stayed in YWCA for the first 3 months, and then they pushed me to enter the competition to become a model. And I was like, well, I used to stand for my dad to fix the clothes on me. Maybe I can do it. Boy, I was in for a surprise. It was totally different. And I was a real tomboy and learned how to sit and how to walk. Wow, that was very different. So that's how I became a model.
Yes. Well, I think a couple of things that I recall about your story, too, is that you ended up getting this opportunity with the solicitor, or a lawyer, for those of you in the United States who don't know what we're saying. But that was because you had an interview, like a deposition that you had to do on behalf of the experience you'd had with the woman from the boarding house. I find that fascinating.
Yeah, she tried to protect me, and she wanted to make sure that it was understood that because I could have been implemented, because not that I was helping in any knowledgeable way, because I obviously I wouldn't know, but I was there helping the girls and doing the small things. And she wanted to make sure that I was in no way marked with anything, which was wonderful. Good. And I had to go and sign. And there was this one particular girl that I knew, because I was there, that she could not have done the procedure. And so there were certain details I had to go and sign. So I protected her, but she really mostly wanted to protect me.
Well, it was so interesting to think about your path and how everything fell into place. And I would be curious, yes. How did it feel to be you the night that I read that you went to the appointment for the interview or whatever, for the discussion with the lawyer, and they kind of forgot about you. And they're like, oh, can you just come back tomorrow? And that's when you had to spend the night in a phone booth. You must have been terrified. Were you afraid?
That was when I was, I mean, at the beginning, when that was like my heart sank right down to the floor, bang. And I didn't know what to do. So I just went around and I sat on a Piccadilly trying to figure out what I was going to do. And I knew I would have to probably spend my night somewhere. So I went to a place where there would be always a lot of people. And train stations usually are places where there are always people, there's always certain amount of security. So I went there and I tried to get a place in YWCA, but everything was full, and what wasn't full I couldn't afford. So I ended up, staying in the telephone booth. But you know what? I wasn't even tired in the morning. I was, at 18, I was like full of energy, and I just, suddenly I was in London and it invigorated me. Suddenly I was like, I'm going to conquer this town. I didn't know how. But I really strangely was not afraid, because I believed in myself. I knew that I was going to do something. I didn't know what, but I knew I could get a job. And I thought, I'll make it.
Yeah, the vibration that we exude in the world attracts what, we're sending out. So you believed in yourself. You had some faith, right? You believed that everything was going to work out. You didn't know how. You couldn't go back home because the fear, and tell us a little bit about that fear. So you and your parents were watching the news when you realized of the invasion, and that, and your brother calls and says, what do you want me to do, Dad? And Dad says, stay there, just stay there. What was that like to have the conversations with your family? We can't go back home. I mean, this is where you become the refugee. And most people listening to this have no idea what that would feel like.
Yes, well, it was, my father was older, and he tried to protect me even at that time. And he knew that for me to go back, because I was already gone for 9 or 8 months. And he was through the worst times of a communism. And so he was afraid that I would be then marked as a spy or something. So he wanted to make sure that nothing happens to me. And at the same time, he knew that he was not able to, my mother and he didn't speak English, and he didn't want to, as he said, put the albatross on my shoulders, because he knew that if my brother came, suddenly everybody would be on my shoulders, because I was there for a year, and I would really essentially have to become head of the family of 5. Although my brothers probably would have been okay, but he knew that he and my mother would have been my responsibility. And he didn't want to do that. So he decided to go back, and he told my brother to stay. And my brother, who was at the time in Wales, he went back home too. So everybody went back, because they only went out for a short time. And if anybody stayed, it would have snowballed. So, none of us could stay except me, because I still had a visa that allowed me to stay longer, which was given to me during the Dubček times. But because he was skeptical of the communists, he was afraid that if I do go back, and so he wanted to go back and feel it out and see how safe would have been for me to go back. And so I stayed another year and a half, and then I write in a later essays about what happened when they suddenly issued, I still had a visa, but they suddenly issued an order everybody must come home. By this time, I was away a year and a half, which made it even more frightening. And also by that time, I did not think I could live back there anymore under the regime that was much stronger. It was strangling people far more than before. And also when you don't know, you accept a lot of things. But once you do know, it's harder. And so my father wanted me to stay. So I had, but at the time when they left and my brothers left, I only had myself to take care of. And so I just felt, I can do it. I can do it.
How did you avoid going back? I mean, is that when you went and applied for being the model and you were able to work your way away from that requirement to come back to the country?
No. I won a competition to be a model. And then in my book, there's another essay which explains when they closed the border, I had at the time a boyfriend, and he married me so that I could stay. I didn't have to go. I would be legal in Czechoslovakia. I was legal in England, but if I didn't come back by the given date, I would have become illegal immigrant. And then my brothers would have suffered. They probably wouldn't have been able to get a job. My father would have suffered. He was about to retire. And so I knew I couldn't do it. And that's one of the essays that actually was in a book of essays from around the world. Was one of the 15 essays from around the world in a book called Stories Through the Ages, which is still on the internet, and there are some amazing stories. And that story was what I went through at the time that was probably harder than when the Soviet Union invaded Czechoslovakia. Well, it's in a different way harder, because I was at a point, do I sacrifice my family or do I sacrifice myself? That really was a question.
And how did you come to your answer?
Well, the third, that what I didn't think of the third possibility was that this boyfriend would offer to marry me. And so once I was married, I was legal, and then my parents didn't suffer, my brothers didn't suffer, I didn't suffer. And then that's what eventually, a couple of years later, with the paperwork done, I was actually able to go home. And I'm forever grateful to my friend who did that amazing favor to me.
Oh, and how long? So then you win this contest. Tell us about this foray into this next phase of your life. Talk a little bit about that. And also, how long did you stay married to your friend? And were you able to, what a gift.
I had to stay married for 3 years. And then it obviously, as you can well imagine, when somebody helps you with such a conundrum, I fell in love with him, but he didn't. He wanted to. He just said, no. This is not part of the arrangement. This is not a marriage. And so anyway, I got over that. And then after 3 years, when the time came, I was able to. I paid for the divorce, and we got divorced. And my only regret is that I have no idea where he is now. And we kind of completely lost touch. And so I would like to say thank you. So if he ever sees any of the podcasts, thank you.
Yes. Oh, whatever. Thank you to your good friend and generous friend. And good for him for saying, I can see how you might fall in love with me because I'm amazing and I was a good guy to you, but good for him for not, that was a good boundary.
Yeah, right. We stayed friends for a long time.
Yeah, your beautiful life that unfolded. So you become a model, and then somehow you're a James Bond girl. I just love these photos. I'm going to try to pick one and share it when we post the podcast episode. Tell us about that life. What did it feel like in your life by design then?
Well, I mean, modeling was really very exciting, and I suddenly was, saw my picture on a magazine covers, and it was like I was making a little name for myself, which was wonderful, and I was very proud. And then I started to do a little TV shows on for BBC and for ITV, and do a little small parts. I did up around 100 commercials, TV commercials. So that was also fun. I would sometimes in a one break, I would have two commercials, and so that was fine. And I was very happy with that. And then of course I was cast for this very small part for James Bond movie. However, we did a lot of promotion. Once you are a Bond person, you're a Bond person. Everybody. It was the most wonderful experience in my life because, there are a lot of stories about, bad blood, about movies and stars, etc. I think that the Bond people are it's such a, you kind of a group. You're like part of this, a group that, like a book club or something,
Yeah, you're
and
like a club. It's like a special, entry into this club that only a few people
yeah,
are
exactly.
invited
And
to.
so,
Yeah.
and everybody was very friendly and it was wonderful. And we did a lot of promotions and we traveled together. We all laughed and, and and nobody really did any air about themselves. It was just wonderful experience. And I actually did meet Roger Moore in New York, when he came to New York to celebrate the 50th anniversary of James Bond. And, we reminiscent about the day we were spending time, and it was wonderful. And just such a down to earth person, there is now this, middle-aged woman or more than middle-aged woman comes to me and says, "Hi, do you remember Pinewood Studios?" And he goes, "Oh, which movie?" And I tell him, "Oh, yes." And so we chatted about it, and it was wonderful.
That's so cool. You hanging out with Roger Moore. Of course you are. Of course. I love your life. So when did you ultimately move to the United States? What was the life transition out of, you're in the movies, you're doing commercials. Why did that shift?
I met an American.
Of course, it's an American man. Here he comes.
That's right. I met and fell in love with American in London. And then from there, we went actually following you probably. We went to Hong Kong. We lived there. And so each one of my child was born in a different continent. My son was born in London, which is Europe. Then my second son was born in Hong Kong, which is Asia. And my daughter was born in New Jersey in America.
Yes.
So one in each continent.
I love that so much. Wow. And so a lot of travel probably happened for your kids too.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we did. We also lived in Monte Carlo and we lived in Boston. And so and of course, this was all my mother's. Every time we traveled, I was thinking of her and travel. And many times I said, travel really is a university of life. You learn about other cultures, you learn about languages, you learn about people, you learn about food, you learn about tolerance. It's just the most wonderful, spectacular experience that you cannot read about. You have to experience, as you probably know yourself.
Absolutely. And I want my children to treat traveling across the globe as if they just called an Uber and they were going across town. And I remember my son, who has been to Japan 3 times. He's 27 now. He speaks Japanese and he just loves Japan. And he was in high school about to fail his French class, but he was teaching himself Japanese at the same time. And I was like, oh my gosh, he just loves it. And so one of the things I think about is the ability to expose yourself to the globe should be like you're exposing yourself to just something easy in your own town. So I told all three of them. My youngest went to Paris by herself for her 18th birthday as a birthday treat. And my friends were like, why are you alone? She's going alone. I said, it's the safest time. She has a phone. She can translate. She can do anything she needs. Don't be afraid to travel. And then my middle child,
my mother.
Yes. I mean, I want them to, and when you said your mother came from meager beginnings, so did my father. He didn't have electricity until he was like 6. They didn't have indoor plumbing. I mean, you said your mother couldn't go to school because there was only one pair of shoes or whatever. They couldn't get to school. Think about the leapfrog of life changes that you created for your family, that my father created for us, that I'm creating. I love this. And the world should be globally accessible and not that big a deal. It's not that big a deal.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great. It's great to travel. Really is a university of life because you learn so much, but so much. And traveling alone, I mean, it's wonderful. I mean, you're just like my mother. You let your daughter go at 18. So
That's
you
right.
are one of the few people who probably understands why my mother let me go.
Absolutely understand. And she knew that it would break you out of whatever cycle she had been in. And she had wanted it for herself as well. So she couldn't create that for herself at that stage. But what a gift you gave them to be able to let them visit you in England. So she did get to do some travel before her life when she passed.
Yes,
so that's so good.
She did. She came to England, I think, 3 times, which was fantastic.
That's fantastic. You know, everybody listening, anything is possible. Anything that you can visualize and create in your mind's eye is possible to you. And one of the things that's beautiful about your essays is that you're telling those stories over and over again about circumstances evolving. Is there any particular story that you want to highlight and encourage people to go and get your book? Like, is there a favorite episode or essay that you've written?
Well, I actually have 2. One is The Encounter with the Future, which is an essay that a book is named after. And that is about it's a really incredible story how my father and I missed each other when he came for my 21st birthday in London, and how he remembered to get to Ipswich, where I lived when he was visiting me, and how he was helped by a Hungarian man who he had a fear when he was a child. Czechoslovakia was ruled by the Hungarian. He was beaten up because of he didn't speak Slovak. He spoke Slovak, not Hungarian. And he had obvious animosity and fear towards Hungarians. And he learned that in the end, in London alone, it was Hungarian who helped him.
Interesting.
Because at that time there were no phones. There was just I don't even want to think of what would have happened if he wasn't able to come to Ipswich. So that is a very important essay I have written. And the other essay, there's also a funny essay that I wrote, which I think it's very short, but it's, now you see, just start me and I go. There was an essay I wrote about during COVID, how my father used to hate the Russians so much, all of the people. And so there were always shortages. So toilet paper was one of those things that was always short of. So we used to tear up the paper in squares and fold it up. And so my father, though, always used to keep the photographs of the Russians, of the Brezhnev and all of the Russian people. And he would keep it for himself to use. Yeah. So I told the story during COVID when there was no toilet paper. And he said, I can't believe this. He said, you block up the toilet. And I was like, is that what you wanted? So I thought I love that story. And the other one, not to forget, given the war in Ukraine, and what's going on, how the Putin is another Brezhnev, how he takes people away. My brother worked for BBC, and BBC was telling people back home, BBC World Service, and then he worked later for Voice of America. So it was always these places that they told people in Slovakia. That's how we got our news from abroad. And then one day he was hit by KGB car and left for dead, but he survived. And when I told him, don't go back to work, he said, no, silence is not an option. And he went back and worked at BBC World Service, and then eventually he went back to work. He came also, when I came to America, he then applied to work in Voice of America, and he worked for Voice of America.
Wow.
So that's sort of one teaching story, one funny story, and one sort of emotional and deep story. Also teaching story.
Of course it is. And, silence isn't an option. I mean, it's a choice. And it's an option, but it's a profound choice. And
for him, it was not an option.
That's right. And I'm really proud of him for not being shut down. He did not let fear overcome his purpose,
Right.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad he survived it. Has he still around? Like what?
Yes, he's still, he's retired now,
Yep.
He retired. He actually went, when a Cold War was over, then he taught English to all the ambassadors who went to Slovakia. So that was at the end of his career. That's what he was doing. But then he retired. So he's retired. That's awesome. And watch soccer now.
Yes. Well, I love that. Thank you for sharing those. I do encourage people to go get your book. Back in 2016 or 2017, my first husband and I took 2 of our 3 children on a 62-day road trip through Eastern Europe. And we went to Bosnia-Herzegovina. We went to Hungary. We went to Poland. We went to Slovakia. We went to Bratislava.
Bratislava, yeah. That's where I'm from. Slovakia. Actually, I'm from Slovak Republic, and my hometown is about 30 minutes from Bratislava.
It was fascinating. It was kind of like in this day and age, or I guess 2017. It was like a tech. It was like Silicon Valley, and everything felt very American, like the restaurants, not the buildings, but like you'd go into a restaurant and you're like, wow, I could be anywhere in a big city. And it was really fun. The children, my girls, they really liked it. But we also, my son stayed in Prague for a semester for school. I've spent weekends in Prague. I mean, being in that part of the world is just beautiful. It's just fascinating. And my kids, though, because we wanted to show them a world outside of America. And they said, if you take us to one more Crimes Against Humanity museum, I mean, it was everywhere. I mean, people don't understand that what your very brief reference to this time frame. I mean, your family was afraid for their lives. And there were so many horrifying crimes, and what's happening in the Ukraine. People should get educated. So, it doesn't mean you have to speak up and be a voice like your brother, but it does mean that if you don't understand your past, you can't help shape the future. And that's why we took our children on that trip. We wanted them to see the extremes of the world and, understanding and learning about the aggression. And we were in Bosnia, and the woman we met with was like, the kids aren't even still in the same classrooms. They can't, there's still all sorts of prejudice and abuse. And we're really fortunate to be in the circumstances we're in, even though a lot of people judge where we are. But it is a first world situation compared to a lot of what we saw. So I don't know. I just wanted to share. Yeah.
There's no comparison. No comparison.
None. So I'm sure that you have lots of philosophies that you've passed down to your children and your grandchildren. Are there things that you say to them because when you pull that toilet paper off the roll, how privileged you are. I mean, I still think about that compared to my father's upbringing. When I walked to a bathroom, which bathroom shall I use? You know, my father had to leave the house. You know,
Right.
right? So I'm like, I think about that legacy and that the freedom and the privilege all the time. I would be curious as to how you've passed down some of your beliefs and some of that remembrance to your own children.
Well, I've always been very strict about, for example, the food. You know, if they started to be fussy, I would say, you know, there are children in the world that are starving.
True.
And do not live. You know, I have always tried to make sure that the children have the healthiest and food, and I would pay a little bit more to get the best. But boy, they were not allowed to leave anything, not a morsel. So I think that I hoped, and I also took them home. I hope that they have a view and have a tolerance, and I hope I taught them that. And if I did, to teach them how to understand differences, then I would be very happy.
I'm sure you have. Just you being you is a beautiful role model and experience, you know, for someone to have heard your story. And I'm just so grateful you shared a little bit of your story with us today. I want to ask, what does it feel like to be you with that story as your foundation?
You know, I never really thought about it. And it's interesting because I would tell my kids the story, but it wasn't until people started to read my book and I heard them say, wow, you know, you had an amazing life and wow, what you went through. When you are in it, you really just get on with it. You don't really think about it. I think that people who have a hard time or who may not succeed, that cannot overcome the problems, if they dwell on it, especially it's no good dwelling on it even after. But if you dwell on it when you are in a situation, then you just see the negatives and what can go wrong. I never really thought about, oh my goodness, if I do this, what can go wrong? I think about if I do the other way, then, oh wow, look at that wonderful result I'm going to have. And I actually never thought of myself as my life being very interesting, which is why I first started to write fiction, because I didn't think, it was just when my kids started to say, Mom, you were always storyteller, why don't you just write? And also, it's harder to publish a book, it's easier to publish a short story. So I decided, okay, I will write a short story, see how that goes. But I have really, my heart was in my first book that is still lying unpublished, but eventually I'll get there. But so I never thought of myself as my life being interesting. And every time I podcast, people say, wow, your life was so interesting. I go, really?
Absolutely. And you're still young. You have a big life ahead of you still. Tell us what's next for you in your life by design. What are you dreaming about?
Well, I mean, as I said, I already written a fiction book, and I have also now I have grandchildren. I wrote 9 little books of short story, little children's book about my dog. I had these cutest little dogs. I wrote a Barney story, awesome. 9 of them. And so that's what I have. And I still want to travel. I have traveled all over the place, but believe it or not, I have never been to Australia. And that's what I want next year. That is what I want to do, January or maybe even this year. But I'm so busy with the book that I was going to go in November or October to Australia. But I don't see that happening now because I'm very busy. And I feel like, now that I'm doing it, might as well take it to the end. I'm a person who always finishes what start. Even when I halfway through realize, I still finish it.
You still finish it, yeah.
So I think maybe January I would like to go. I have a lot of friends in Australia that I have met in London. I have met in Hong Kong, and I kept in touch. So it's time I went to Aussie land, and many of them came to visit me in New York and in London. So I really have to go.
You have to go.
That's on my bucket.
That is on your bucket list. And I can't wait to see the children's books published. And, the first country I ever went to, by the way, at learning that I could leave my small state was Australia. I lived in Australia for a year, actually. So
wow.
You're going to love it. It's great.
I know I will love it. I can't wait to go.
I can't wait to hear all about your trip. And, you're so beautiful. I highly encourage you to pick up that modeling gig again. I mean, the women in our sweet age, in our third and fourth quarters of life, I think that you would absolutely be picked up as a model. You're absolutely gorgeous.
Well, I don't know about that.
Well,
I think I'll stick to being a grandmother and mother and my writing. My heart is now in writing.
Yes, and you are a beautiful author, and I am excited to have had you on the podcast today. Anything you want to share with us? Anything else? Where can we find you? What would you like to share with our audience today?
Well, I'm on Instagram, and I'm also on Facebook, and I have a website which makes it very easy for people to get to the book. And that is www.anikapavel.com.
Okay.
And so Annika Pavel is one word. So that's my website. And it's set up in a way that it's very easy to get into my book, to get a book. So I hope people read it. It's a little bit of a history of the country, a little bit of a present. It's a little bit of a humor, a little bit of a sadness, little tears, and a little bit of a history of America. I write also about how my aunt, my father's sister, came to America, and which was a really very interesting story. Just if you want, just very quickly, she was engaged to. When people used to go from Europe to America, the parents usually engaged them or got married to a boy they knew. So she was very young, and so she was the parents made sure that she was engaged to the boy from the village, and so she went up there, and so on a boat they met another couple from their village who they didn't know before, but because they could speak the language, they all got together. Well, love blossomed on the ocean, except the two engaged couples switched.
Oh.
And so both of them were very happy, and my aunt was married to my uncle forever until she died. And so, and I have these wonderful, wonderful cousins here, two cousins, a boy, a man and a woman, now no longer a girl and a boy.
Yeah.
And we keep in touch, and it's spectacular. It's wonderful.
That's a beautiful love story. I love that so much. I think I like him a little better.
Yeah, it was like they got together. That's it. And they,
I call that love by design. Love by design.
Love by design.
That's right.
It's what happens on the ocean, right?
That's right. I love the ocean. Well, last question for you. I like to ask all of my guests the following question, which is, what do you want to celebrate the most about your life by design?
What do I want to celebrate? I would like to celebrate, obviously, my children and my grandchildren. But I think my book, my writing, I think my writing is what I would like to be remembered by more than anything else.
Oh, I know you will be. My mother's 84, and she just has relocated to an independent living situation about 4 months ago. And just 2 weeks ago, she joined a writing group. And she is so in love with it, and she has dementia. And she came across a journal the other day, and she was being sad. And the journal, she was kind of praying, and the journal fell flat on the desk. She had it leaned up, and it fell flat. And she opened the journal, and started reading and was reminded of so many elements of her life that she had forgotten. And it was just a gift to her. And I am so pleased when people choose to write their stories. Not that you're going to forget one day, but the gift not only to your children and grandchildren, but it turns out it might be a gift to you one day as well. And I'm just so grateful. Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. I think you're a phenomenal person, and I'm really glad to have met you today. Thank you. Thank you for being on Coffee with Nicoa. And we will be in touch, and I will put all of your beautiful information and a link to the book in our podcast notes. So any last parting words before we wrap up?
Thank you. I have thoroughly enjoyed myself. You know, these things can be frightening, but with you, I had a ball. I had a great time. And keep going.
Oh, yes. We'll both keep going. I'll keep podcasting. You keep writing, and everyone will benefit. Yes.
Wonderful.
All right, my friend. Thank you again, and I will be in touch.
Great. Take care.
Thanks for joining us for a caffeinated conversation. Subscribe to Coffee with Nicoa for more stories from people living a life by design. You can also find inspiration on Instagram. Just follow Coffee with Nicoa. And check out our website, coffeewithnicoa.com. And that's Nicoa, Nicoa. We look forward to talking with you soon, and enjoy your coffee between now and then.